The holiday season has a strange way of slowing time down and speeding it up at the same moment. One day you're surrounded by people, noise, traditions, and expectations. The next, the calendar flips, and suddenly it's a new year with quiet questions sitting underneath all the celebrations. Like, did I actually feel present this year? Or was I just getting through it? Well, listeners, today's conversation is about something many of us crave, especially around the holidays and the new year. This sense of inner peace that does not depend on circumstances, and the idea that real joy might not come from adding more goals, more success, or more productivity, but from learning how to truly be where we already are. Listeners, welcome to the Mindful Living podcast. I'm your host, Sana, and my guest today, Larry Kesslin. Well, his life shifted in 2012 during a trip to rural Uganda, where he expected to bring resources, but instead discovered a deeper truth about joy, connection, and purpose. For the past 13 years, Larry has studied human joy across cultures, working with leaders, entrepreneurs, parents, and people navigating major life transitions. He's the creator of a framework which is called the joy molecule, exploring the alignment between what you are, who you are, and why you are here. Larry also speaks openly about mental health, including his family's recent experiences, bringing honesty and humanity into conversations that are often oversimplified. And today we are going to explore one core idea here. Presence leads to inner peace, and inner peace can open the door to joy. So let's get down to the conversation. And Larry, welcome to the Mindful Living, and I'm really, really honored to have you here.
Thank you, Sana. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for providing this opportunity for me to share this message.
Absolutely, absolutely. Larry, to begin with, when people hear the word presence, to be honest, it often sounds abstract or spiritual. From your work and your life, how do you define presence in a way that feels practical and human?
I think the only moment that exists is right now. So the practical part is there is no option. The only thing we do as humans is we choose not to be present because presence is our natural state. And our mind is the vehicle that kind of takes us out of that presence. And worrying about what might come or being frustrated or angry about what already happened is in the past and in the future, and there is no past and there is no future. It's a construct in our mind. So I think the easiest way to be present is to focus on one's breath, because that's one of the things that is constant with all of us. And it's talked about often in meditation and mindfulness practices. And at the end of the day,
Mm.
we are a very interesting creature. I mean, that's the challenge, is that most of us believe that we are the smartest creature and that we dominate this planet, but in many ways, we are just I don't understand it all the time. And I
Mhm.
know that many of the people that I meet struggle with accepting the fact that we are part of something greater than ourselves. In my worldview and the work that I've done and the travels I've taken, I can't imagine that we're just here to wake up in the morning, go to work, make some money so that we can eat some food so we can go to sleep and do it all over again. I think the presence you talked about in the opening message about the holidays, I think a lot of the greatest presence comes with connection to self. And then once you're
Mhm.
connected to self, you can connect more deeply to others. So for me, the practicality is just in breathing every day and being conscious. Every change starts with just simply noticing that there's a challenge in the first place. So start by noticing that you're not present and then figure out some ways and some tactics on how you can become more present.
Mm, mm. No, that is actually, that makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense, Larry. Larry, before we proceed further in
Sure.
order to understand presence and inner peace, like personally, I I would love to know, like, how your life shifted in that trip to rural Uganda. I mean, what was like before the trip? What happened? Like, was something like drastically changed for you, or was it like gradual moments of change? A quick pause for you listening listeners. If this conversation is already giving you language for what you feel inside, or if you feel it's helping you see your patterns with a little less shame, hit follow. All right, back to it.
It was a drastic change. So I have been an entrepreneur for 32 years now. April 15th of this year will be 33 years. So 1993, I was working at the General Electric company, and I left my job a few days after getting back from a week with 85 inner city kids in Colorado. And on that trip, I noticed the same thing I noticed in Africa, which was I was observing people that in my mind had so much less than I did, and in their outward way of being were so much happier than I was. And when I went to Africa, we brought a container of computers. We ended up opening a computer lab in eastern Uganda in a town called Abali in the Abayadaya community, which is a Jewish community in eastern Uganda. And I saw all these people that were, some of them were younger, some of them were older, but they were all just very peaceful. And they would give you their shirt off their back. They would cook you their only chicken, the one that lays their eggs for their family. They would kill it and cook it for you because you were a guest. And I just saw the humanity of it all. I saw the beauty of what it's like to be part of something. And I noticed that everyone there had a smile on their face. And yes, there was struggle. And the drastic change came about 7 weeks later. I mean, I landed at JFK Airport after literally 24 days in Uganda and Kenya. And I'm sitting there saying, I defined success for myself at 28, and I defined it as the ability to do what I want whenever I want to do it. And I was now 48, almost 49 at the time. And I was doing that. I mean, I had a business that allowed me to do whatever I wanted whenever I wanted. And I ended up sitting there saying, okay, if this is my definition of success, and I just saw these people happier than I am, then I think I'm done with success and I really just need to be significant. I've been reading Bob Buford's book Halftime, and there was a book that came out called Second Mountain. And all of these books were talking about what happens after we achieve what we thought we always were here to achieve. And I'd been running a business for close to probably 17 years at the time and have been most people would call successful. Yet underneath it all, there was something burning inside of me, some small yearning that would fester periodically. And I knew there was more. I knew there was something more than what I was pursuing. And I went to this conference called Opportunity Collaboration in October of that same year. And I went into a small group setting with about 15 other people. And the facilitator asked 3 questions that kind of changed my life. And those 3 questions is, what is poverty? Who gets to define it? And why are we trying to fix it? And in that moment, I started realizing that who was poor in that situation? Were the people that I met poor, or were they just impoverished? Were they just lacking in things the way that we in the United States have things? And maybe they had something that we didn't have, which I was searching for. And what I came to the conclusion of is that in the United States, I think we're poor. I think we're poor emotionally and spiritually. And in Uganda, Kenya, I've been to Nicaragua, I've been to Southeast Asia. In most of these cultures, people are rich with connection. And I think at the end of the day, that is one of the major reasons that we're here. And presence helps us connect more deeply, first with ourselves and then with others. So when truly present, we can be there with others versus being there by ourselves around others. It's said very often that you could be in a room of 1,000 people and still feel alone. And that's because we're lacking connection. And I think that is what I found in Uganda. And that is what I've been seeking for the last decade plus, is to find that sense of connection in my own life. And so many people said when I got back, I bet you can't wait to get back to Uganda. And honestly, Sana, I have not been back since. I did not need to go back to Uganda to experience what they had there. I wanted to bring what they experienced there here. And I want my life to be filled with that. So I've spent the better part of a decade building community here in San Diego and helping people that have shared purpose and shared values and shared mission connect at a level that they're not used to connecting, that they don't get on a daily basis. So I think that is the piece that shifted for me dramatically, is that I realized that happiness and joy are not defined by our circumstances. And when you start digging deeper and you start going through this door, and for me, the doorway is this door to inner journey, to figure out who we are and what we are and why we're here so that we can connect more deeply with others around us.
Mm, well, no, it is. Yeah, I think sometimes, we often kind of, keep on discussing on whether it's our actions, our decisions, or it's the luck or destiny. But I believe sometimes life gives us those opportunities to reflect back or to do self introspection and kind of, think about like authentically, not just for the sake of thinking or putting something out there for the people to just, kind of for the engagement purpose, but to actually genuinely kind of, question maybe our current belief systems, our thought processes, or the way of living or working or believing. So, yeah, that's quite a transformational one in there, Larry.
Yeah, we are a very interesting creature. I mean,
Yeah.
at the core, we have most people that I meet, and I don't even know what I know. I say in my book that I know nothing, absolutely nothing. What I have is a lot of beliefs and ideas. And
Mhm.
I was having a conversation with a friend the other night, and he was talking about a word, and the word happened to be collaborator. And I'm like, that's a fuzzy word. There's no pure definition for that. We know what a light is, we know what a table is, we know what certain words are, but there's lots of words in our language that we use that don't have finite definitions. And that's where wars start. And that's where people get into great arguments around words. So when I start working with people, I'm a coach and I help people find more peace in their life. And I help people connect with themselves and connect to others. And I ask them through that process is like, how do you define these words? How do you define happiness? How do you define joy? How do you define success? How do you define a want or a need or home or family? All these words that we throw around that people think we all define them the same, and we don't. We don't at all. And the last book I wrote before The Joy Molecule was called Success Redefined. And I
Mm,
redefined success when I was 28 as the ability to do what I want whenever I want to do it. And at 50, I came to the conclusion that I was missing a big piece. So my new definition is the ability to do what I want whenever I want to do it while being part of something greater than myself. If I'm not being of service, if I'm not being significant, then the freedom part has very little meaning to me at this point in my life. And I can tell you to this day, from 2013, which was my greatest income year in my life, um,
mhm,
I was turning 50 that year. My income has gone down every year since then, and my joy and happiness has increased every year since then. So money is not the driver. Peace is this inward journey to figure out what we are, who we are, and why we are, which is how I define joy in the book, is that when you know those three things, nobody can tell you you're anything other than what you are. And the flip side of it is that I put them in that order because to me,
mhm,
those are the orders of connection. That a what connection, which is what you do, what you like, that is a very simple connection, a low level connection, surface level is what I would call it. The who connection, which is based on your values and how you show up and your essence, that's a deeper connection. When you connect with somebody around who you are, that's rich. When you figure
mhm.
out why you're here and you meet others that have a shared why, to me, that's when joy gets exponentially increased by connecting with others that have shared purpose, which is where the title of the book came from. I was working with a writer on Success Redefined in 2015, and I had this construct in the book said conscious connection plus purpose equals joy. And she looked at it and she said, "Oh, that's C2P." And I'm like, "And?" She said, "Well, if H2O is the water molecule, then C2P must be the joy molecule." And I'm like, "That's pretty brilliant." And it sat there for a decade until I was ready to use it again. And when I started doing some research, nobody had ever coined the term the joy molecule. And so the title of the book what came from this idea of conscious connection plus purpose. But when I started looking at people that really were joyful and what they all had in common, they all knew what they were, who they were, and why they were.
Mhm. That's a very, very interesting origin behind this joy molecule. And now let's listeners, let's get back to understand, presence and inner peace. Like you talk about presence leading to inner peace, but um presence does not always feel peaceful. So like it sometimes it brings anxiety, grief, or discomfort. So how do you reconcile with that?
So to me, those issues are all wounds that we've had earlier in our life, and
Yeah.
they're bringing up these traumas. So Eckhart Tolle would call them a pain body, or Michael Singer, um, a subscara, whatever you want to call them. They're experiences that we learned when we came out of the womb and we were first born. I don't believe we had any of those feelings. We were just living in wonder. So to me, all of those feelings are learned behavior, and they're learned by societal norms. They're learned through parental input. They're learned by siblings and friends and classmates and people that were kind and not kind. So at the end of the day, we can choose to react any way we want to. The challenge is that we don't choose to act or react. We just react. And that is what many would call basic self, is our inner child. And I think the way to change and become more present starts with simply noticing that you're not present. That's where it all starts. Everything starts with simply noticing. If you're not happy, noticing that you're not happy and say, well, why am I not happy? And if it's based on circumstance, then you're never going to be happy. Because if happiness is based on your outer experience of the world, then you'll never be that. And joy, to me, joy and happiness are very different. Happiness is this experience, and joy is this inner knowing. And joy is a sense of knowing. And I ask people a lot how they define happiness and joy. And I
Mhm.
meet a lot of people. And the one I have the most challenge with is the people that say, I'll know it when I feel it. And all I can tell you is that I was not raised in in a household filled with
Mhm.
happiness and joy. Now, my household was not horrific at all. My parents were middle class, uh, grew up in New Jersey, suburb of New York City. And my dad did go broke when I was 10, and we had lots of stress in the house. So I did not grow up with a joyful, loving experience, though my parents did love me and still do, and they're still alive at 94 and 91 and are amazing human beings. Yet when I was growing up, I did not experience a lot of joy. So I've had to seek it. And I think in order to find something, you need to define it. So that's why I define joy as knowing what you are, who you are, and why you are. And I've talked to lots of people about it, and I don't need my definition to be theirs. So my real opportunity in this book is to ask people, what is their definition of joy? What is their definition of happiness? And what is their definition of presence? At the end of the day, all that matters is how we see it. What other people see and say and do is irrelevant unless we make it relevant. So there's a lot of pieces to this, a lot of layers to this. But at the end of the day, I believe that we are able to decide in any moment, in any given situation, that we can turn off the learned behavior and decide to just be present and experience what's happening, whether it has more energy or less energy. We look back decades after certain situations happened that we thought were horrific or horrible, and they turn out to be some of the best experiences of our life.
Agree. I agree. I agree, Larry. And you speak openly about mental health, and your family's experience. How does presence support healing without forcing positivity?
Yeah, I think that the mental health part is we are spend so much time in mind. And I think that is the opportunity is to not be in mind, is to be a being that has a mind, that has access to thought. And the mind is a beautiful thing, but can also cause some major challenges in our day to day living because it wants to define our experience. And the truth is that our mind is just a tool that we get to use. When I say we, there's a greater consciousness that lives in all of us. That is the being behind the mind. It is the I when I say I don't like myself or I feel like I'm too fat or whatever I say to myself. There's an observer back there. I use the analogy of the sky, the clouds, and the weather. So the sky is me, the clouds are my thoughts, and the weather are my feelings. And there are times when the clouds are thick and heavy, and there are times when there's no clouds at all. There's times when they're moving slowly, there's times when they're moving quickly, and those are our thoughts. But we're still the sky. We're still that blue energy above the clouds, and the weather is our feelings. And how do we allow these thoughts and feelings to rule our life is the opportunity. The opportunity is to say that those thoughts and feelings do not rule our life. They are just input in our life. And we get to choose if we're awake and we are aware that those are just opportunities for choice.
And I think this really emphasizes on um, agency, like, seeking for control, not control, I would say, but agency, like this permission to be human. Because presence, it does not demand joy. I believe it creates space for honesty. Sometimes the honesty is the first step toward peace.
Yes, I believe agency is the right word. I think that we as creatures have agency over thought and feeling. The challenge is that most people that I've met in my life, including myself for 6+ decades, had no agency over my thoughts. And I met somebody about a month before I had a major experience in my life that shifted how I see things. And she said to me, Larry, it's just a decision. And I looked at her, I'm like, yeah, it's just a decision. And then when I had the experience that I had, which happened to be a psilocybin experience, that my being left my body. And I realized that I was more than this physical being that I'm in. And it gave me clarity as to what I truly am.
Mm.
And that I have access to these thoughts and feelings. And it is just a decision. It's a decision to believe that there's a being greater than us that lives inside of each of us. That is
Mm.
the faith that we need to hold on to that allows us to know that that being is having all of these experiences from all these different creatures around the world. And we're just having 1/8 billionth of the human experience in our own little mind. It's actually a big mind, but our own mind. And we're not even experiencing everything that's going on in the world, much less the solar system and all the other planets. So, what are we really experiencing? And what are we basing our belief system on? Because that is what caused me significant challenge over most of my life was to believe that my thoughts were real and my thoughts were me. But I no longer believe that. I believe that my thoughts are information and data that I have access to.
Exactly. Exactly. I think that this is a very, very significant realization, Larry. I really
Life
changed the
changing.
entire. Yeah, it's life changing. Absolutely.
Yes.
Larry, in the interest of time, before we wrap up, if listeners they would like to connect with you, I'm very sure they would be interested to explore more about the the joy molecule. So, if they would like to do that, what would be the best way?
They can go to my website, 5-dots.com, or they can email me, Larry at Kesslin.com, KESSLIN.com. I am very available for people. I love connecting with individuals that are on a journey because I believe we're all on a spiritual journey to find some easier way to live on this planet. And I love helping people do that. So I'm happy to talk to just about anybody. I tell people all the time, I'll give anybody 30 minutes. Whether they deserve more than that will be up to the first conversation.
Absolutely, absolutely. I love that clarity, Larry, and I'm going to make sure that all the links are there in the show notes for all the listeners out there. So just refer to them along with this episode on your favorite podcast platform. And as we close, what I'm taking listeners from this conversation is that joy is not something we chase into the future. It is something we uncover by returning to ourselves. Homecoming. Presence is not about fixing life. Inner peace is not about avoiding pain. Joy is not about constant happiness. It is about alignment, honesty, and learning to stay with ourselves, especially when it is hard. So, Larry, thank you so much for bringing depth, humility, and sharing your story, your journey with all of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sana. You have a wonderful day, and I hope that 2026 brings all the joy and peace and success that you dreamed of.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Larry, for your blessings, and to all the listeners as well. And as we step into, and as we have stepped into the new year, maybe the question is not what you want to achieve next. Maybe it is how present you're willing to be with the life you're already living. Until next time, this is the Mindful Living. Stay gentle with yourself, and this is your host, Sana, signing off. Thank you.